without fear of the consequences, and without consideration of the rules of what is politically safe or palatable, we must stop pretending that the degradation of our politics and the conduct of some in our executive branch are normal. They are not normal. Reckless, outrageous, and undignified behavior has become excused and countenanced as telling it like it is, when it is actually just reckless, outrageous, and undignified. And when such behavior emanates from the top of our government, it is something else. It is dangerous to a democracy. Such behavior does not project strength, because our strength comes from our values. It instead projects a corruption of the spirit and weakness. It is often said that children are watching. Well, they are. And what are we going to do about that? When the next generation asks us, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you speak up? What are we going to say? Mr. President, I rise today to say enough.
Some tough words for President Trump from Arizona's Jeff Flake. Flake took to the Senate floor just minutes after announcing Tuesday that he would not seek re-election. But Flake wasn't the only Republican senator engaging in a war of words with the president on Tuesday. Here's Tennessee's Bob Corker.
I don't know why he lowers himself to such a low standard and debases our country in the way that he does, but he does.
Do you regret supporting him in the election?
Well, let's just put it this way. I would not do that again.
So you wouldn't support him again?
No. No.
And we're back now with Molly Hooper and Michael Graham. Molly, let's start with you. A lot to talk about in Senator Flake's speech. He is not running for re-election with voters, but he does seem to be running for something like a legacy merit, running for the respect of his children and grandchildren, as he put it. What did you take away from his remarks?
Wow, I mean, what a speech. Senator Flake is usually pretty sure-footed when it comes to speaking on the Senate floor, and I actually heard him, and I was listening to it because we were getting reaction from Republican senators who had been at the meeting with the president. And I was listening to Senator Flake, and you could hear his voice sort of tremulous and trembling a little bit. You know, it was a remark, and it was directed more so at the administration. But I've heard other people on Capitol Hill say that there needs to be more civility, you know, between when asked about what's going on with the White House and whatnot, and Congress. Also, it was he made a good point. You know, a few years ago, Jeff Flake, there was an article, and I can't recall the publication, but basically in which, in fact, actually, it may have been on CBS where he was compared to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, because Jeff Flake has been one of those members of Congress. He was a House member for 6 terms and then became a senator. He's always been one of those members who has really stood for his principles and you know, to heck with everybody else. And even when his own party in 2001, in the early 2000s, were spending a lot of money on earmarks, Senator Flake was out there, you know, calling out his fellow Republican congressmen for pork of the week. And so he's always been one of those, you know, shine a bright light, transparency advocates. Let's cut wasteless spending. But he also supports things like, he was part of the Gang of 8 when he came to the Senate, you know, to push for a bipartisan immigration reform bill. So the fact that he went on the Senate floor and made this speech, I think it seemed sort of reminiscent of a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. However, Mr. Smith stayed in Washington. You know, Mr. Smith stayed to fight in Washington, and Senator Flake is choosing not to.
I don't think ducking out is the principal position in the final analysis, but I want to hear from Michael Graham on this. Your takeaways from this speech. Was it a preview of what we are going to see excerpted in future documentaries?
Possibly, but you just made the point. I mean, the shorter Jeff Flake messages, oh my gosh, our country's in a terrible crisis, I'm leaving, good luck with that, see you later, bye. So that's, you know, there's a missed opportunity there. Look, I'm part of that libertarian-leaning small government conservative group. There are apparently about 7 of us left in the United States. That's not where the Republican Party is. I keep asking myself, who was the audience for this speech? The media loves bashing Trump, they're going to love it. Republicans? 88% of Republican voters, according to the latest Pew poll, support Donald Trump. 18% of the voters in Arizona, according to one poll, support Jeff Flake. The fact is, this is the Trump party. It is not the Republican Party that it was 10 years ago. It is the Trump party. And Senator Flake decided, if this populist wing is going to win, then I'm going to leave. The same thing that Bob Corker decided.
Yeah.
And my question to all these longtime Republicans is, well, if you're just going to leave the party, then it's going to become the populist party, as opposed to finding a synthesis. The populist ideas that work with your principles, the conservative ideas that can help those blue-collar workers, put them together, you could have a governing majority. Instead, what do you have? Bob Corker wants to fight. He does not want to join. He wants to fight.
Well, maybe Flake and Corker put on their chef hat and realized that the ingredients that they were looking for in the Republican Party did not mesh well with the ingredients that Trump was offering. But you mentioned that Flake was not polling well in his home state. He acknowledged that he probably could not win re-election in 2018. Let's listen to a clip of him on Tuesday afternoon saying that.
Now it seems that you know, if you deviate at all from you know, the president's positions, or if you fail to condone his behavior, then you're out of step with the party, or at least a segment of the party that votes in Republican primaries.
Now, Molly, flipping back to you here, that portion of the United States, Arizona, Utah, that is a Republican area, but it's also an area in 2016 that may have potentially trended a little bit more Democratic. Do you think that Flake's speech could put those states in play in 2020?
Well, I think what I've heard is that Jeff Flake was getting some pressure from, even though he said he denied this on camera, but I had heard that Senator McConnell, the leader, and Cory Gardner, who is the Republican from Colorado who runs the Senate re-election arm of the Republican Party, had been sort of pressuring Jeff Flake, you know, listen, your numbers aren't that good. If you stick this out and run for re-election again, we're going to have a nasty primary, a nasty Republican primary, and it's unlikely that you'll even win, and whoever does win is going to have a really tough time defeating a Democrat who emerges from their respective primary, as a fighter, as opposed to somebody who is beaten up by the president and whatnot. So that's, those are fights that the Republicans want to avoid. They don't want these Republican primaries where you pit a candidate like Jeff Flake, an incumbent candidate seen as the establishment, against sort of this more populist candidate, because, again, as you're saying, those states were a little bit more Democratic, and when it comes down to the general election, the Democrat would be in the stronger position to win that election, because the Republicans will put up a candidate like a Sharon Angle, who was in Nevada, and was just knocked out of the water in a general election fight.
Gentle people, we're going to have to go, but a flash poll from each of you, Molly Hooper and Michael Graham, yes or no? We have no more time for more than yes or no. Was this a win or not for the Bannon wing of the party? Molly, yes or no?
Yes-ish.
Yes. Michael, what about you?
Win for Trump.
All right. Thank you both very much. We'll have to leave it there. I'll catch you on the flip side.